Hey everyone, it's a real pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Joyce for opening up this session. I'm really excited to talk to you today about designing new possibilities and to continue the conversations that we've been having on craft and human-centered design. And I also want to acknowledge the journeys that we've all been on together today, and that we are among some of our last sessions of the day. And so for that reason, this talk might feel a little bit different, and at times we might be moving slowly and hopefully attentively, and sometimes even closing our eyes. But before I get you to close your eyes, I thought I would introduce myself. My name is Alice, and I'm a creative researcher and publisher. And my background spans around 17 years working in the arts and community engagement, focusing on cultural expressions like the visual and literary arts, food, and music. And sound is actually going to be a big part of the experience that we're going to be on today. These days, those experiences have moved me towards human-centered design work that focuses on the potential to imagine different stories for architecture and design, to not only be tools, but agents of social change by building imaginative narratives around the urgent social questions of our time. In this session, I'm going to share some open-ended insights and approaches to my practice, where I'm constantly holding and creating space for relationality and generative thinking that I feel is really necessary to move us into an imaginative space. But before we hop into things, I thought that I would take a moment this afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you might be tuning in from, to center into and to create an active listening space together. And so in order to do that, I'm going to ask everybody to first just lean back with your shoulders and drop and settle into your center, and to close your eyes. I'm going to play a fragment from a meditation by Mia Birdsong on the intersections of equity, interdependence, and liberation, and I would ask for you to join me.
Freedom is found in deep, connected, vulnerable belonging with ourselves, with other humans, and with the rest of the natural world. Freedom is in belonging. Take a breath. And another. Close your eyes or lower your gaze and notice you. Feel you. Take another breath. Notice gravity under the bottoms of your feet or the backs of your legs. Gravity is a reminder that you belong. Gravity is the earth holding you. She holds you just as strongly as she holds anyone else. No matter how your heart hurts, what mistakes you've made, or what you feel, you are worthy of being here, and the earth knows it. When you notice gravity, you are reminded that you belong.
Thanks so much for coming into this space with me. And now that we're centered together and hopefully feeling a little bit more connected than we did just a few seconds ago, I want to share with you the relational philosophies that guide my work in 3 chapters: provocations, invitations, and redefinitions. As a research-based designer, I'm really interested in how we fully leverage the observational and propositional aspects of design to listen and to question and to unsettle and push forth new ideas. And as a designer, my language is one of renegotiation. I'm interested in how we renegotiate what has been into what could be. At the center of my design practice is a question that I come back to regularly, which is, what if design moved beyond frameworks of disruption and innovation and was actually focused on opening up our capacities to feel more? Feeling is such an embodied language, a sensorial communication that really helps us be open to and perceive other possibilities. And this approach, for me, as somebody who works editorially, is inspired by Octavia E. Butler's belief in the capacity for science fiction and storytelling to be an important source of knowledge. I'm interested in moving us towards a culture that allows us to be in the space of the feeling of it all, as a means for us to all stay deeply connected. Because as designers, we need to acknowledge what's at stake if we aren't prioritizing the practice of cultivating our abilities towards empathy as a means to foster belonging. Arriving at the design space from my experiences working in culture, I noticed that within the context of design, there's a huge emphasis on the universal. So in our design training, we're trained to identify a problem and design a solution. And a lot of us are working with big scales, right? Just before us, we heard about people going with space. And we tend to be incentivized towards these universal one-size-fits-all solutions. But when we design from this place, sometimes we really tend to miss the opportunity to be honest about the complex and entangled web of realities that we find ourselves in, and how sometimes the universalist frame of design and thinking privileges certain dominant groups. It can actually cause harm to those whom which we're designing with and for. Our current status quo limits the way that we design. So as with my love for research to open up new questions, my previous question unravels into another, which is how do we expand our frames of design? In the context of exploring new possibilities through frameworks of equity, sustainability, inclusivity, and more, we need to acknowledge our vast human conditions through our unique lived experiences of gender, race, orientations, ability, and class. And in doing this, hopefully we can come to understand that there are a multitude of ways in which we all experience the world. And if solutions are our task, then we need to think in multiples. So I'd love to share with you how that shows up in my practice. This next chapter, Invitations, is grounded by my experiences working in hospitality, food, and beverage. You heard earlier about my love for the farmers market. I live for acts of hosting. I love making people feel welcome, creating spaces where we can be in practice with what it means to belong. And in a way, the projects that I work on, they serve as scaffoldings for the imagination, where we're designing languages and structures for people to think expansively about new possibilities in design and architecture. The first project I want to share with you, where invitation is a central part of the method, is Deem Journal, a publication and platform exploring design as social practice. As a design journal rooted in social practice, we expand on how design is and can be social. Born out of the desire and interest to frame up and present design as a diverse, process-oriented practice, and the belief that every output is unified by a process. So the steps through which something transforms with intention, from imagination to manifestation, is design. And through editorial and creative interventions, we're providing an expansive view on what design is and what it means in people's daily lives, as well as who can see themselves as a designer. And our first issue centered on dignity as a condition that we might narratively design for, as the foundational building block to establish new narratives in design. For this issue, we were moved by Adrienne Marie Brown, a doula, community organizer, and writer's framework of emergence, which outlines the practice of how we can understand and adapt to the complex realities and patterns. A living and breathing toolkit for how we might assess our relationship to change by listening with why. And for us, anchoring into a design publication through the work of a thinker like Adrienne really helped us understand that design is a possibility for everyone active in the daily practice of social transformation. We explored topics like social architecture, transcending discussions beyond building materials and techniques to think about human activity and interaction and how that's considered throughout the entire design process, as well as community living and going beyond built structures that can support this way of living and into an inquiry towards the relationships that help us sustain communal forms of life. We highlighted examples from New York, Mississippi, Austria, Brazil, Uruguay, and more. And going deeper into ideas around food sovereignty and access, we highlighted the work of urban farmers building new frameworks for what farming can be and how communities can engage with urban farming in a way that affirms their humanity. Our second issue focused on education, produced in 2020, understanding that education is the foundation of how we actually process the world. And in this issue, we explored the role of design and design systems in the ways in which we produce and share knowledge. We sought out the expertise of educators working across many disciplines, including graphic design educator Ramon Tejada, who focuses on collaborative models of inclusion and the responsible expansion of the design canon through the act of puncturing, literally creating spaces to write in and insert new stories. As well as community organizers working through the concept of the residency and placing care, friendship, relationship building at the center of how we might rethink our approaches to design education. Issue 3 explores equity as a complex design challenge And in this issue, it was clear to us that no matter what framework we were pursuing, equity is how we acknowledge and account for difference. As always, we invited a range of viewpoints to be a part of this issue, including writer and facilitator Jez Chung on the concept of neurodiversity, which really pushes us to think about embracing a variety of neurotypes as a consideration to approaching equitable design. In the next issue, issue 4, we re-examine the meaning of place by exploring new types of place that are emerging in response to newly recognized needs that are enabled by the internet, the digital, and the virtual. And thinking about this also at the scale of the body, we invite somatic practitioner Prentice Hemphill to have a conversation with us that opens up thinking around place that centers non-physical placemaking and connection and healing. Issue 5, our most recent issue, focuses on the biggest design challenge of all, the climate crisis. And in the making of this issue, we invited climate, design, and policy experts, young folks leading climate responses, practitioners thinking about adaptation through indigenous knowledge, and this issue is led by an interview with marine biologist and policy expert Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who is interested in a climate future that is committed not only to our survival, but a climate future to which we're all called to respond through our unique talents. Those invitations have manifested into a conversation about the intersections of climate change and cultural heritage, an eco-futurist workbook for imagining a future that is in better relationship with our ecosystems, a climate fiction story that explores themes of loss, displacement, and the impact of human actions on the environment, as well as a conversation with a climate activist who is using technologies like AI to help make climate conversations more accessible. My final chapter is about redefinitions, a practice that I think happens in continuum. And as designers, a lot is being asked of us daily. We're working on building and communicating about organizations, products, and solutions. And my hope is that we don't lose ourselves sometimes in the doing of design, as much as we can maybe potentially redefine it as a process of deep listening, a practice of deep listening, attuning ourselves to different and varied needs in our worlds. In a new project that I'm working on, I'm interested about how we leverage the framework of philanthropy by placing narrative power building at the center, redefining what architecture means within the context of environmental breakdown. Alongside resourcing community-led solutions, I focus on shifting narratives to push forward new systems and relationalities, and invest directly in work that thinks through narrative change, the idea that our shared realities are socially constructed through storytelling. And so new stories and language frames can provide a different framework that creates space for new possibilities to arise and for us to be able to scale positive impacts in our worlds. This framework unpacks architecture as a set of plural activities, using narrative design to redefine architectural discourse that considers the different forms of knowledge that are relevant to how we inhabit our planet. And this process acknowledges that an approach to climate needs to be intersectional, and that we should be, in this work, trying to address multiple inequities simultaneously. And in this context, from the lack of community participation in our built environment and how it's realized, to whom and how people are educated around these topics. And we have the ability to learn from different examples from community organizers, architects, designers, urban planners, across people and projects that we support. For instance, Comunal in Mexico, to Arquitectura na Periferia in Brazil, to Girls Garage, an organization here in Oakland, as well as the Conkey Design Initiative in Nairobi. And basically, engaging plural perspectives allows the institution to address the root causes of climate breakdown from multiple angles. Redefinition is also happening across different scales of this type of work, thinking about how do we conceive institutional formats and spaces by bringing people into the conversations in the beginning across differences, and resourcing the creation of new stories and non-traditional perspectives, as well as designing multiple activities like educational festivals, exhibitions, enhancing networks of exchange between people and communities. And what emerges from these forms of engagement are projects that center the Caribbean as an incubator for land-based knowledge, to projects that encourage architects and designers to imagine a new kind of AI model for the profession that prioritizes indigenous knowledge and considers accessibility and equity and many more. In designing the public discourse program, editorial is not only an impact strategy, but it's also a process that's deeply embedded in how I approach redefining narrative systems. With the hopes that designing an editorial-first platform, we can engage in a range of sensory and immersive experiences and experiences like audio, film, experimental essays, and more to connect the thoughts of different practitioners and knowledge makers in culture, art, architecture, design, environmental studies, and sciences. It's literally a way of space making for new stories that are underrepresented in environmental discourse. And I'm really excited to say that as of today, this work here is no longer living on Figma exclusively between myself and my collaborators, but is now available for people to kind of read and engage with. This type of engagement through direct creative action is at the heart of the work that I do. It's basically where the invitations multiply into generative insights and where we can live in some of these futures that we want, that we're sensing, the worlds that we're building, through multiple points of view. I want to share with you a snapshot of what that looks like in practice, and perhaps we'll revert back to our listening practice that we started earlier, where I share a couple of insights from a recent symposium series featuring architect Anupama Kundu and London-based designers Resolve Collective.
Every human being has a whole, there are vast areas of unexplored territory of intelligence and of consciousness, and I also believe that there is that we are much more connected than we perceive.
We try and work in ways that also embrace that ecology, but that speak to a type of co-conspiracy that works very, very deeply with the aims and the values of those that we're working with. We work sometimes within the more formal architectural space, so within master planning and policy, but that's always in ways in which we're trying to center the voices of others.
So as we come to the end of this session, I want to leave you with a redefining questioning tool. Most of the time, we're all creating from the places that we know, the experiences that we know. And it's really challenging intellectual and emotional work to be able to dream past that, to imagine something else. Earlier, Joyce talked about the relationship between design and therapy, and I am a big advocate of those connections. So much so that I thought I would share a question with you taken directly from my therapist toolkit, which is, what else can be true? In the scope of what we're designing for, what else can be true? And I really hope that we can hold that question close to us when we're thinking about new possibilities and new points of view and new approaches to our work, but also to our practices. And to recap this journey that we've been on together and the open-ended and slightly nonlinear principles that ground my design process, there are provocations, which means how do we be in relationship with questions that will allow us to sense otherwise, invitations, how do we engage in active curiosity to seek other perspectives that are missing and make spaces for their points of view to be articulated, and redefinitions, our practice of reshaping systems and power relations through new and collective narratives. And so I'd love to leave with a reflection from whatever you might take away from what I had a chance to share with you here today, which is how do we commit ourselves to designing expansive frames of action? I hope that we can constantly challenge ourselves to be interactive in all of our strategies and the value systems that guide our work, and to continue to build our capacities to bring new realities to form. However, I have one final affirmation from the late, great DMX, a gift to us all, which is that in order for these types of principles to emerge and to flourish, they need the essentials, our time and our attention. And this is what I believe this work requires. And so we've come to the end of our journey together today, and I want to thank everybody for being here at the end of a long and hopefully inspiring day. And I want to extend thanks to the Figma team and to everybody who has worked tirelessly on this production, all the contributors to this presentation, the editors, graphic designers, animators, and writers who I have the privilege of working with across all of these projects. And if you want to be a part of any of these conversations, I encourage you to please follow along at deemjournal.com and revisionsmedia.com. And lastly, I'd love to thank my friends and my family who made it to San Francisco today to be here in the audience. None of this would be possible without you. Thanks so much.